Hey guys, tonight we're doing something cozy, soothing, and deeply disrespectful to human survival odds. We're sliding into the medieval era, an age when Europe nearly rage-quit existence. Not because of one big dramatic event, but because the continent kept stacking disasters like a man who refuses to stop adding items to his online cart even after his credit card declines. Tonight we're exploring how medieval Europe almost completely died out. And when I say almost died out, I mean this was the historical equivalent of watching someone lose their job, their car, their health insurance, and then their house, and then getting a letter saying their student loan interest went up. It's a famine, it's a plague, it's war, it's cold, it's bread that might be haunted, it's doctors who look at your fever and say, "Ah yes, we must remove your blood." So before you get comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here, and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Somehow, no matter where you are, it's always late enough that your brain is replaying something humiliating you said in 2004, like, "It's a premium streaming service. Now dim the lights, switch on a fan for that gentle medieval wind through a leaky hut ambience, get comfortable, and tuck your feet in." Not because of monsters, because of rats, and fleas, and whatever else is living in your bedding rent-free. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live through a time when every day feels like you woke up inside a broken group project, where your retirement plan is don't get stabbed, and your healthcare provider is a barber with a rusty hook? What would you do if the rain never stopped and the crops started melting into the ground like wet cereal? Could you survive in a world where breakfast is beer and a bread brick? And the only thing more common than lease is existential despair, and what happens when the entire continent gets hit by famine, and then, immediately after, the plague arrives like a surprise bonus level from hell. And now, congratulations. You've just woken up in medieval Europe. The year is 1315. The sky is angry. The fields are rotting. And history is about to begin its long, dramatic, exhausting tantrum. Good luck. You wake up in a hut that smells like old beer, goat sweat, and something you pray isn't mold, but deep down you know it is. Your bed is straw, your blanket is wool, and your roommates include your family, your livestock, and several insects who have legally claimed squatters' rights. The church bell rings in the distance like an alarm clock designed by someone who actively hates comfort. You're 22 years old, which means you're basically ancient, and your knees already sound like a bag of rocks being shaken by a confused peasant. You roll over and brush hay out of your hair. Again, there is no pillow, just a particularly lumpy part of the mattress where a mouse might be plotting your downfall. Your feet are already cold, and the air is thick with what you optimistically call the morning smell. It's a delicate blend of body odour, animal breath, yesterday's stew, and that earthy undertone of nobody has invented Febreze yet. In the distance, a rooster crows, which is less the romantic symbol of dawn and more a chicken's way of mocking your suffering. Your home is technically a house, but house is a strong word. It's a structure made of mud, wattle, and hope, with walls that lean slightly in the direction the wind blew last night. There's a thatch roof above you, bravely holding back about 70% of the rain, and a dirt floor below, valiantly holding on to every drop that gets through. You look around at your family, wrapped like burritos in scratchy blankets, all wearing the same expression. Is it worth getting up? Spoiler, it never is, but you always do. Sunlight creeps in through the gaps in the door, revealing the cloud of dust and the soft movement of fleas, which in a more modern era would be considered a public health crisis. In medieval Europe, it's just Tuesday. Somewhere nearby, a pig snores. You're not sure if it's the family pig or Uncle Egbert, frankly, you've stopped checking. Privacy is not a thing. You live, sleep, eat, and occasionally panic together, sharing not just your meagre resources but also every cough, sniffle, and interesting new rash. Your wardrobe is simple, a linen shirt if you're lucky, and a wool tunic over the top. These items have seen things, battlefields of spilled stew, years of accumulated grime, and more repairs than a medieval road. Laundry happens about twice a year, or whenever someone important is coming to visit, whichever is less frequent. The air is cold and damp, but on the bright side, that means you can't actually smell yourself most of the time. You shuffle toward the door, careful not to step on the chicken, who takes her revenge later by laying eggs in your only pair of shoes. Outside, the world is mostly mud. Mud as far as the eye can see. The path to the fields is a well-trodden slip and slide of churned earth, punctuated by mysterious puddles that you don't want to think too hard about. The neighbours' houses all look about the same, slightly crooked, smoke rising from the roof, with laundry that's been drying for days but is still wetter than your sense of humour. As you breathe in the bracing morning air, a bouquet of wood smoke, manure and disappointment, you start your day knowing it will look suspiciously like yesterday, and tomorrow, and every day after that. You work, you eat, you shiver, you repeat. Yet somehow, you and everyone you know keep getting up, patching holes in the roof, stuffing more moss in the walls, and telling each other it'll get better next year. It's optimism, medieval style, not the belief that things will improve, but the stubborn refusal to believe they can't get any worse, and through it all, you survive. Not because it's easy or clean or fair, but because this is what people do. They endure, they adapt, they learn to laugh at the endless inconvenience of it all, find warmth in each other, and hope that tonight the mice at least will let you keep your last crumb of bread. Welcome to Europe population. Stubborn. Punchline ending. If you're wondering what kept people going, just remember, you can survive almost anything as long as you never know what comfort actually feels like. Medieval Europe has been growing for a while now, and it's getting crowded. More babies survive childhood, towns expand, and suddenly every patch of land that can grow food is being farmed. And every patch that can't grow food is being farmed too, because desperation is the strongest fertilizer. It's like a buffet where everyone shows up hungry, and then someone whispers, "By the way, the buffet is 1 carrot and a handful of wet oats." Population growth sounds cheerful on paper, like a medieval baby boom that means more chubby cheeks, more bustling markets, more happy peasants, right up until you realise you're all standing in line for the same loaf of bread. For a few glorious decades, it almost feels like progress. Villages turn into towns, and towns start pretending they're cities. There are so many people that you actually meet strangers who aren't related to you by blood, marriage, or goat theft. But with every new birth, the world seems to shrink just a little more. Soon, space becomes a problem. Families who used to dream about a second cow now dream about an extra square foot of dirt to call their own. Land inheritance gets complicated, because when Grandpa dies, his plot gets split among his dozen children, who then divide it among their children, and by the time it's your turn, you're the proud owner of a patch of mud roughly the size of a doormat and twice as moist. But you don't complain. Everyone's in the same boat, or rather, the same rickety cart. Whole forests vanish as people clear land to plant barley and wheat. Hillsides are ploughed, marshes are drained, and what was once the haunted bog where old Merrick vanished is now the family carrot patch. You find yourself wishing for a few more trees, partly for firewood, mostly so you don't have to make eye contact with your neighbours every time you sneeze in the fields. As the countryside fills up, life gets closer. Your neighbours are always in earshot. Privacy is a rumour spread by travelling minstrels. You share everything: fences, water sources, suspicious smells, and all the gossip your ears can handle. If someone gets sick, you know about it before they do. If someone's pig escapes, it's a local emergency. The only thing rarer than free land is free time. It's a miracle there's any grass left with all the feet, hooves, and general trampling. All this would be fine, sort of, if the land could actually feed everyone. But the soil is tired, the yields are shrinking, and there's no magical medieval fertilizer except for, well, using whatever comes out of the back end of an animal. Sometimes even the manure runs out. You look at the sky and pray for good weather, but the clouds are stingy, and the sun feels like it's negotiating its contract. When a harvest fails, nobody starves alone. Entire regions can go from feast to famine faster than you can say. Has anyone seen the cow? Competition gets fierce. Hungry families start farming in places even rabbits avoid. Rocky slopes, swamps, and little nooks in the forest where the sunlight checks out early. You invent new farming tools, new prayers, and new creative ways to curse your luck. As more people squeeze into less land, you realise that the good old days your grandparents talk about are really just a time when you could drop your turnip on the ground and not worry about someone else claiming it. Markets grow, but so do prices. Bread costs more, taxes go up, and the local lord suddenly decides he needs a new moat, which you conveniently get to help dig. Children start working even earlier, marriages happen younger, and every day begins to feel like a group project where nobody remembered to bring lunch. It's progress, medieval style, more mouths, fewer meals, and a lingering suspicion that things might get worse before they get better. Dry punchline ending. The population boom proves one thing. There's always room for one more at the table, even if the only thing left to eat is the table itself. You step outside and see fields working overtime. The soil is exhausted, forests have been cleared, hillsides are being ploughed like nature's being personally dared to retaliate. There are no modern fertilizers, no scientific yield predictions, and no backup plan besides prayer. Farming here isn't a lifestyle, it's a daily negotiation with the universe, and the universe is not interested in compromise. Your boots, or more likely your bare feet, sink into mud so persistent it feels almost sentient. Every step is a reminder that the land is tired, and frankly, so are you. Your field was once a patch of decent earth, but after years of relentless planting, it's basically just mud with low self-esteem. Each clump of dirt seems to whisper, "Not again," as you turn it over with a wooden plough so flimsy you're not sure if you're working the land or just rearranging disappointment. No one here has heard of crop rotation. The idea is to grow as much as you can, as often as you can, wherever you can. If something looks vaguely green, it's food, or it's weeds pretending to be food. The concept of soil nutrients is about as real as dragons, and nearly as rare. Each harvest leaves the earth a little sadder, a little less willing, and a lot more likely to turn the next year's crop into an exercise in futility. You look around and realise there's nothing left to clear. The great forests that once covered the countryside are now stumps and brush piles. What used to be mysterious woods filled with stories about witches and fairies is now just more land for barley, wheat, or the occasional potato-like object that's probably a rock. The boundary between field and forest is wherever someone last got tired of chopping. Every patch of land is being farmed, even the ones that nature herself labelled danger zone. Marshes, rocky slopes, thin-soiled hillsides. Nothing is off limits when you have too many mouths and not enough bread. You plough land that sheep would have rejected. If you're lucky, you get a handful of grain and a lifetime supply of back pain. If you're unlucky, you get a mudslide and a stern lecture from your neighbour about respecting the spirits of the hill. But the spirits, if they exist, seem to be on strike. Weather, of course, is not your friend. Rain can vanish for months or worse, arrive and refuse to leave. A whole season's work can be washed away in a single storm or ruined by a late frost that arrives like a medieval practical joke. There are no forecasts, only old men with aching knees who predict disaster by the direction their cow is facing. You watch the sky for omens, and you pray the wind isn't about to start an impromptu roof removal service. Tools are simple: wooden ploughs, handmade hoes, maybe an iron spade if your family hit the medieval lottery. Animals help if you have them. If not, it's you and the neighbours, taking turns at the heavy work, fueled by sheer determination and bread that doubles as self-defence. Each day ends with dirt under your nails and the slow realisation that you're basically one hailstorm away from starvation. When harvest comes, everyone helps, even children, elders, and anyone with more than one working limb. The yield never quite matches the effort, but you celebrate anyway, because surviving another year is the only bar for success. You store what you can, barter what you must, and immediately start worrying about next year. And so it goes. Farming isn't a peaceful country idyll. It's a daily scramble, a never-ending battle against tired earth, moody weather, and creeping hunger. And when it all falls apart, when the fields turn sour or the rains refuse to stop, there is no safety net, just neighbours sharing misery and advice, and maybe, if you're lucky, a slightly less disappointing loaf of bread. Dry punchline ending. In medieval Europe, the only thing growing faster than your crops is your list of things to worry about. Welcome to the edge. And then the rain starts, and doesn't stop. Crops rot in the fields, grain turns to mush, livestock starves, bread vanishes. The year is 1315, and Europe enters the Great Famine, one of those events that makes you realise life isn't fragile, it's basically made of damp paper. Soon, people start eating whatever they can find, including things that should never be consumed by humans, emotionally or physically. At first you think it's just a bad week, a gloomy stretch, a little extra drizzle, the kind of weather that makes you sigh dramatically and say, well, that's annoying, like you're inconvenienced, not endangered. You tell yourself it'll clear up, the sun will return, the fields will dry, the wheat will stand back up like nothing happened. But the rain keeps coming. It comes in sheets and spits, in mist and torrents, in the kind of cold, wet persistence that seeps into your bones and makes you feel like you've been personally cursed by a cloud. The ground becomes a sponge. The roads turn into rivers of sludge. The air smells like wet soil and decay. Every morning you wake up and listen for silence, hoping for one quiet day, one break in the downpour, but instead you hear the same soft drumming against the roof, like the sky is tapping its fingers and saying, no, not today, not ever. You walk to the fields, anyway, because hope is a powerful drug and you have nothing else. But what you find isn't a harvest, it's a funeral. The crops are drowning, the stalks bend and blacken, the grain heads droop with rot. Anything that isn't mush is mould. You pick up a handful of wheat and it slides through your fingers like wet hair. You look around at your neighbours and they look back at you with the same expression people have today when their phone battery hits 1% and the charger is across the room. That slow, sinking panic. This is the part where your stomach starts planning ahead. Normally after harvest you would store grain and feel temporarily safe. Not relaxed, nobody in medieval Europe relaxes, but safe in that uneasy, half-satisfied way that comes from knowing you can survive the winter. Now there's nothing to store, nothing to grind, nothing to bake. And the little grain you do find is the kind you can smell is wrong. It's damp, clumped, and already growing fuzzy little nightmares. You don't want to eat it, but you also don't want to die, and medieval life is mostly just choosing between those two things on repeat. Then the animal starts suffering. Your cow, who normally looks like a slow-moving furnace of security, begins to thin. Your sheep stop producing wool as thick. Pigs, usually the unstoppable trash compactors of the medieval world, can't find enough scraps. Chickens lay fewer eggs, because even they are stressed out and can sense when humanity is spiralling. Livestock depends on stored fodder and dry pasture, and when everything is soaking and rotting, Even the animals look around like, wow, this is bad. And when animals starve, you starve. Bread disappears first. That's how you know the world is ending. A medieval diet is bread. Bread is life. Bread is breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, and emotional support system. Without bread, you're just chewing on air and pretending it's filling. Soon the loaves become smaller, then harder, then mixed with whatever extra filler people can find, peas, bark, ground up weeds, anything that can stretch the flour. By the time you bite into one, it tastes like damp sorrow and splinters. But you eat it anyway because hunger doesn't care about flavour. Markets become tense. People who used to greet each other with tired politeness now stare like wolves. Prices climb. A sack of grain becomes worth more than a family heirloom. People start selling tools, clothes, even bits of land just for enough food to make it another week. You hear rumours of children being abandoned because parents can't feed them. You hear rumours of theft, of violence, of men hanging for stealing a loaf the size of a brick. And then the desperation truly sets in. You see people eating things they never would have touched before. Nettles, roots, bark boiled into a bitter paste, old leather softened in stew, rats, if you're lucky enough to catch one. And yes, stories begin to circulate, whispered in hushed voices by the fire, stories about people eating the unthinkable, the kind of stories that make you stare into your bowl of watery soup and think, please let it not come to that. But in the Great Famine, it often did. And the cruelest part is that nobody knows when it ends. There is no forecast, no relief shipment, no government safety program. There's just wet air, empty granaries, and the slow realization that Europe isn't just suffering, it's shrinking. People are dying quietly, not in one dramatic moment, but slowly over months. You watch neighbours fade, you watch the village lose its energy. The bell rings more often, not for church but for funerals, and as you lie down at night, listening to rain tapping the roof like a cruel lullaby, you realise something terrifying. This isn't just a bad year. This is the beginning of the continent's long, exhausting collapse. Punchline ending, and the worst part is you can't even comfort eat about it, because comfort food has also died. Starvation doesn't just empty bellies, it dissolves manners. People steal, people fight, people hoard, parents abandon children, crime spikes, and the social rules that once held villages together begin to unravel like an old tunic sleeve. This isn't just a lack of food, it's a slow breakdown of what makes people act like people instead of feral raccoons fighting over a potato peel. At first, everyone tries to behave. There's still that early famine optimism, the kind that makes you say things like it'll get better next season, or we'll share what we have, or surely God is just testing us and not actively bullying the continent. People help each other. Neighbours check in. Someone brings over a small sack of grain, and you act like they gifted you a golden crown. There's even a sense of grim togetherness, like you're all stuck in a sinking boat, so you might as well sing while you bail water. But then the weeks stretch into months, and hunger changes the way you think. It starts small. You eat your portion faster than usual, you lick the bowl more thoroughly, you notice yourself staring at the crust someone left behind on the table like it's a sacred relic. The food doesn't just become important, it becomes the only thing your mind can hold. When you're starving, the world shrinks until it's nothing but the idea of eating. Every conversation, every thought, every dream becomes food-shaped, and then people begin to change. The village feels tighter, not in a cosy way, but in the way a clenched fist feels tight. Faces become sharper, eyes become more suspicious. People stop smiling, because smiling burns calories and also implies you have enough strength to be joyful. You start noticing how often neighbours glance at your door, not as friends but as quiet inventory managers, and that's when hoarding begins. If you have grain, you hide it. You bury it. You stash it inside a wall. You wrap it in cloth and keep it under the bed like a sleeping baby. People become secretive, and secrecy becomes normal. Suddenly, every household is running its own tiny paranoid survival operation. You're not just guarding food from strangers, you're guarding it from the people you've known your entire life. Because hunger doesn't respect friendship. It respects opportunity. Theft becomes common, not grand robberies, not dramatic heists with masks and daggers. Just small, desperate stealing. A chicken from a coop, a sack of oats from a shed, a loaf taken off a windowsill while it cools. You don't even get angry anymore, you get tired. You understand it. You hate it, but you understand. People begin locking their doors, which in medieval Europe is hilarious, because the locks are basically decorative. A determined thief can break in with a stick and a bad attitude. But it makes everyone feel slightly more in control. Control is rare now, so you take what you can. Then comes violence. Arguments over food turn into fistfights. Fistfights turn into stabbings. People who would normally settle disputes with gossip and passive aggression now settle them with blunt tools. The local lord cracks down with punishment, hanging, flogging, mutilation, because rulers love discipline when they're scared. But punishment doesn't stop hunger, it just adds fear to the soup, and in that pressure, the village begins to fracture. Families start leaving, wandering the roads in search of better land or kinder towns, which is also hilarious because every town is starving too. Travellers become suspicious, strangers are turned away, even pilgrims are treated like they're carrying bad luck in their pockets. You hear stories of people collapsing on the road, never getting up, of bodies found in ditches, of villages so desperate they refuse to help anyone, because helping one starving stranger might mean losing your own child, and yes, children. This is where famine becomes truly unbearable. Some parents abandon children because they can't feed them. They leave them at monasteries, at church doors, by roadsides, hoping someone else has more food, hoping someone else has a heart bigger than their hunger. Sometimes it works, often it doesn't. You see thin, quiet children begging near the market, their faces too serious, their eyes too old. They look like miniature adults trapped in fragile bodies, and everyone pretends not to notice because noticing hurts. The worst part is how quickly it becomes normal. After a while, you stop being shocked by theft. You stop being shocked by death. You stop being shocked by cruelty. Hunger rewires the entire community until survival is the only law anyone truly follows. The same neighbours who once shared jokes and ale now watch each other with narrowed eyes, measuring how weak the other looks. Because weakness means opportunity, and opportunity means food. And at night, when you finally lie down, belly aching with emptiness, you realise that the famine isn't just starving bodies, it's starving kindness. Punchline ending. Turns out civilization is a thin layer of manners and it peels right off the moment the bread runs out. Eventually the famine eases, but nobody recovers. Everyone is thinner, weaker, and permanently running on low battery. Immune systems crash. Children grow up stunted. Adults age faster. Europe survives the famine the way someone survives a car crash. Alive, but absolutely not okay. And that matters, because now the continent is basically an underfed tinderbox waiting for disease to strike a match. The rain finally lets up. The clouds drift on. There are even days where the sun glances through the window, like it's checking in to see if there's anyone left to warm. The rivers shrink, the fields can be walked without losing your boots, and there are fewer funerals. You want to celebrate, but the joy feels forced, like you're throwing a birthday party after the cake has already fallen on the floor. The truth is, the people of Europe aren't so much living as limping along. Everywhere you look, people are tired. They are thin in a way that isn't fashionable, just fragile. Kids are smaller, limbs stick thin, their bodies slowed by years of not enough food. Growth spurts are a myth, unless you count the extra room in their sleeves. Children born during the famine will never reach their full height. They become living reminders that sometimes history leaves its mark in bones as much as in stories. Adults don't fare much better. Anyone over 30 looks over 40. Their faces are sharp, eyes sunken, teeth loose. Your neighbour used to carry sacks of grain across the field. Now he sits by the door, out of breath from just sweeping up the mud. Chronic aches and pains become everyone's new hobby. Old injuries and new exhaustion combine until whole communities develop a limp. Nobody moves quickly anymore unless there's bread on the line. Then there's the problem nobody really talks about, the way everyone is getting sick. The endless hunger has hollowed out immune systems. All those months of eating bark, boiled roots and bread that might technically be a mushroom have left bodies defenceless. A single cough can now sweep through a household like a rumour. You see rashes, infections, fevers, things that used to kill only the very young or very old, but now threaten everyone. What little food there is still stretched thin. The next harvests are bigger than during the famine, but nobody trusts them yet. You can't shake the feeling that disaster is always lurking, waiting for someone to drop the last crumb of hope. Rations stay small. Everyone eats with the anxiety of people who have learned the hard way that there is always less than you think. The social effects of years of scarcity run deep. Nobody trusts good times anymore. Neighbours barter suspiciously. Families hoard what they can just in case. The village gossip used to be about who's courting whom. Now it's about who managed to get eggs that week. You measure life by calories and count your blessings by how many days it's been since someone collapsed in the field. But the worst is what you can't see. The slow, invisible damage done by hunger. Babies born during the famine are weaker. More children die before their first birthday. Mothers struggle to breastfeed. Even when there's enough food again, you notice it takes months, even years, for people to regain any colour in their cheeks or hope in their eyes. Everyone's carrying the famine inside them, like a shadow or an unpaid debt. It's not just individuals who are fragile. The whole continent feels breakable. Crops fail more easily, pests spread faster, and the slightest new crisis, be it another bad harvest, a local war, or a wandering band of outlaws, could tip your whole village back into disaster. There's no such thing as resilience when nobody's got a reserve, and this is where things get especially dangerous because disease loves a weakened population. When a new sickness arrives, and it will, the continent isn't just underfed, it's perfectly primed to burn. Punchline ending. The only thing thinner than a medieval peasant after famine is the illusion that Europe is ready for what's coming next. You might think cities offer safety, but medieval towns are basically overcrowded bacteria resorts. Houses are packed together, streets are mud and waste, animals roam freely. The smell alone could be used as a weapon, and where humans gather tightly, rats gather tighter. If Plague had to choose a favourite location, it would pick this place instantly and leave a 5-star review. You arrive at the city gates with that hopeful feeling people still get today when they move somewhere new and think, this is it. Fresh start. Better opportunities. Maybe even a warm meal that doesn't taste like boiled rope. But the moment you step inside, the city welcomes you, the way a wet sock welcomes your foot, immediately, intimately, and with a powerful odour you can't ignore. The first thing you notice is the sound. The city is never quiet. It roars and clatters and squawks. People shout over each other like they're competing to be the loudest person ever born. Carts rattle over mud. Hooves slap the ground. Church bells ring as if someone is trying to wake up God personally. Somewhere a blacksmith is hammering metal with such intensity you assume he's angry at the entire concept of iron. A child runs past you holding a chicken like it's a treasured family heirloom. It might be. Then the smell hits you properly. It's not one smell. It's an orchestra of smells. Smoke from thousands of hearth fires hangs in the air like a permanent fog. You smell sweat, manure, rotting cabbage, fish guts, wet wool, and something that can only be described as damp regret. If modern people think the worst smell is the subway in summer, medieval cities would like to introduce you to their entire personality. And this is just the street. The street itself is not really a street, it's mud. Thick, churned up mud, mixed with straw, animal droppings, spilled ale, and whatever yesterday's dinner used to be. There are puddles everywhere, and you learn quickly not to step in them unless you enjoy surprises. You watch someone drop a piece of bread, and it instantly disappears into the muck like the earth is hungry too. Honestly, it probably is. Now look up. Buildings in the city lean inward, over the road, like they're gossiping about you. The upper floors of houses often stick out farther than the bottom floors, which means the street becomes narrower the deeper you go. It's like walking through a canyon made of wood, mud plaster, and questionable decisions. People throw waste out of windows because the concept of hygiene has not yet been invented. They shout a warning sometimes, but not always. It keeps life exciting. Nothing says urban living like dodging airborne filth on your way to buy onions. And the people, there are so many people, you can barely move without brushing shoulders. Everyone is pressed together like grains in a sack, and everyone is carrying something: baskets, tools, firewood, children, livestock, sometimes all at once. You see a man leading a pig through the crowd like it's a polite little dog. The pig doesn't agree. It screams. Nobody reacts. That's just city noise. There are animals everywhere. Horses, goats, chickens, dogs, cats, and pigs, always pigs, rooting through trash and waste like they're the city's unofficial sanitation department. They eat anything. They clean up scraps. They also spread disease, but at least they're enthusiastic about their work. And now, let's talk about the rats. Because the rats here are not shy. These are city rats, bold rats, rats with confidence, rats that look like they pay taxes. They scurry along walls, squeeze through cracks, and pop out of piles of garbage like they're hosting their own little rat meetings. You see one sit on a barrel and stare at you calmly as if to say, "Welcome, this is my town now." And here's the thing. Rats love cities for the same reason humans do. Food, warmth, crowds, endless hiding places. All those packed houses, all those stores of grain, all that waste lying around. This city is a rat paradise. And rats bring fleas. Fleas bring, well, you'll meet that soon enough. For now, you try to convince yourself this is normal, that the city is worth it, that the cathedral is beautiful, the market is lively, and the smell is just character. But deep down, you feel it. This place is humming with invisible danger. Too many bodies, too much filth, too much life packed into too little space. It's like lighting a candle in a room full of dry straw and saying, "It's fine, the candle is small, and when disease finally arrives, it won't have to search for you. You've already moved into its favourite neighbourhood." Punchline ending. In medieval cities, you don't just live close to your neighbours, you live close enough to share their air, their fleas, and eventually their funeral schedule. Now nature calls, and medieval Europe answers with a bucket. You relieve yourself in a wooden pail, then toss it into the street while shouting a warning like "Garde l'eau," which means watch out below, and also you're about to get baptized in regret. Public latrines exist, but they're shoulder-to-shoulder benches where you can make eye contact with strangers while doing your worst. It's like a networking event, except instead of business cards, you exchange trauma. Let's be honest, you didn't come to the medieval city for the sanitation. But even you weren't prepared for how aggressively casual everyone is about human waste. In modern life, using the bathroom is private, sacred. A quiet little break where you can scroll your phone, and pretend the world doesn't exist for 5 minutes. In medieval Europe, the bathroom is a team sport, a public service announcement, a daily reminder that civilization is still just a baby crawling around in the mud. Your day begins, as always, with some form of discomfort. Maybe it's the straw bed, maybe it's the fleas, maybe it's the sound of your neighbour coughing like a dying donkey through the paper-thin wall. But eventually, your body makes a demand, and there's no ignoring it. You sit up, shuffle toward the corner of the room, and there it is, the chamber pot. It's not a delicate porcelain bowl. It's a bucket, a crude container, possibly wooden, possibly clay, definitely questionable. It has been used by everyone in the household. You do not want to think too hard about that. You squat, you do what you must, and you try not to inhale too deeply, because the air down here is already doing too much, and then comes the hard part. You have to get rid of it. In some homes, there's a pit out back. If you're in the countryside, you might have a little privy shed, a tiny wooden box with a hole in it, positioned over a trench like the world's most depressing spa. But in the city, where space is scarce and convenience is king, waste disposal is creative. The system goes like this. You carry your bucket to the window, you look down, you shout a warning, and then you throw it. Sometimes you hear someone below yell back, sometimes you don't. Either way, gravity takes over, and what was once inside your body becomes part of the street. It's like recycling, except instead of saving the planet, you're ruining everyone's shoes. And yes, people really do shout warnings. Garde l'eau is the famous one, especially in French-speaking areas, but many places have their own local variations of hey, move, incoming. It's charming in a way, like medieval politeness. Sure, you're launching filth from a second-story window, but at least you're being courteous about it. Of course, warnings aren't always given. Some people forget. Some people don't care. Some people wake up angry. So you learn to walk quickly, keep your hood up, and always be suspicious of open windows. You develop a sixth sense, the instinct of a person who knows the sky might literally rain waste at any moment. In modern times, we fear hailstorms. In medieval towns, you fear human storms. Now, public latrines exist too, and if you're thinking, finally, a civilized solution, I'm proud of your optimism. But no. Public latrines are long wooden benches with holes cut into them. Beneath the holes is a trench, often leading to a river or a cesspit. There are no walls between seats. Sometimes there aren't even dividers. You sit beside strangers, shoulder to shoulder, trying to maintain dignity in a situation where dignity has already left the building and is now hiding in a monastery. The latrine becomes a strange social space. People talk, they gossip, they argue. You hear about who cheated at the market, who got sick, who stole a chicken. Imagine a modern restroom, but instead of awkward silence and flushing toilets, it's full of conversation and the sound of splashing. Truly the soundtrack of history. And the smell. Oh, the smell! It clings to everything. It seeps into the street. It becomes part of the city's identity. If medieval towns had welcome signs, they'd just say, "Welcome. Please don't breathe too hard." Worst of all, this waste doesn't just vanish. It piles up. It attracts flies. It breeds bacteria. It soaks into the mud and gets tracked into homes. It ends up in the river. Yes, the same river people use for washing clothes, rinsing vegetables, and sometimes drinking. Which means every bucket you dump is contributing to a shared community project. Spreading illness. You don't know that, of course. You just know the streets are filthy and everyone's sick a lot. But still, you adapt. Humans always do. You step carefully. You learn where the latrines are. You keep an eye out for suspicious windows. And you develop the kind of hardened acceptance that only comes from living in a world where poop is not a private inconvenience. It's a public feature. Punchline ending. In medieval Europe, you don't just watch where you're going, you watch where you're standing, where you're walking, and where you're looking up. You sit down near the fire for breakfast, hoping for something comforting, adorable. You get pottage, an endless stew of grains and roots, and a hunk of bread so hard it could deflect arrows. And you drink beer at 6 a.m. because water is basically poison. Even the children drink it. Congratulations, your whole family is slightly buzzed before sunrise, and you haven't even started suffering yet. The day in medieval Europe begins the same way every day begins, with your stomach reminding you that it exists loudly, and with absolutely no sympathy for your situation. You shuffle toward the hearth, half asleep, stepping over someone's boots, a chicken, and possibly a small pile of straw that might be alive. The fire is low but stubborn, coughing smoke into the room like it also just woke up and hates everything. Breakfast, in theory, is supposed to prepare you for work. In reality, it's a ritual of survival that says, here's the bare minimum amount of calories required to stop you from collapsing while you plough a field like an unpaid animal. You crouch near the pot hanging over the embers. This pot is always there. It has been there forever. It will be there long after you're gone. Some historians might call it a cooking vessel. You call it the eternal stew. Because pottage, your main meal, never really ends. It simply transforms. Yesterday's leftovers become today's breakfast. Today's breakfast becomes tomorrow's dinner. It's a cycle of warm mush that loops through time like a medieval screensaver. You ladle some into a wooden bowl. It's thick, dull in colour, and smells faintly of boiled onions and resignation. Sometimes it contains barley, sometimes oats, sometimes peas, sometimes whatever root vegetable survived the winter without turning into mush. You chew slowly, not because you're savouring it, but because chewing too fast risks realising you're eating the same thing you've eaten every day for weeks. If pottage had a slogan, it would be, "You'll eat this and you'll like it," because there is no alternative. Every so often someone gets fancy and tosses herbs into it. Maybe a bit of garlic, maybe some cabbage. On rare, glorious days, a chunk of salted pork appears in the pot like a miracle. Everyone goes quiet when that happens, the way modern families go quiet when someone walks into the room carrying pizza. But most days the pottage is just pottage, and it's warm, which already makes it one of the best things in your life. Now the bread. Bread in medieval Europe is not soft. It does not fluff. It does not bounce. It does not forgive. This is dense rye or barley bread, dark and heavy, the kind of loaf that feels like it was baked by someone who was angry at flour. You pick up a chunk and it makes a dull thud against the table. Somewhere in your brain, a small voice whispers, "This could be used as a weapon." That voice is correct. Sometimes the bread is stale. Often it is stale, which is why you dip it into the pottage to soften it. This is not a culinary technique. It's self-defense. Without the stew, the bread could damage your gums, your teeth, and your will to live. You soak it, bite it, and feel your jaw muscles activate in a way modern people only experience when they accidentally chew a piece of rubbery steak. And then the beer. Yes, you drink beer in the morning. Everyone does. Even children. It's not the strong beer you imagine from modern bars. This is small beer, low alcohol. More like a mildly fermented grain drink. But it's still beer, which means your breakfast beverage is basically a medieval breakfast smoothie made by a tipsy monk. Why beer? Because water is suspicious. Rivers are filthy, wells are questionable, and no one has the scientific language to explain bacteria. But everyone has enough lived experience to know that drinking straight water is sometimes an invitation to spend the next 3 days in the poop bucket situation. Beer is boiled during brewing, which makes it safer. You don't know that, of course. You just know that beer doesn't kill you as often, so you drink it. It's thin, slightly sour, and vaguely comforting. It wakes you up, warms your belly, and gives you just enough buzz to face the day without screaming into the straw bedding. As the family eats, the room fills with the sound of chewing, slurping, and quiet medieval acceptance. You're not chatting about your dreams or your feelings. You're mentally preparing for hours of labour and pretending this breakfast is enough. Outside, the sky is grey, the air is cold, and your muscles already ache at the idea of work. But for a moment, just one moment, you sit by the fire, bowl in hand, and feel something almost like peace. Warm food, warm drink, a roof above your head that hasn't collapsed yet, a tiny victory. And then the pottage runs low, the bread is gone, and the beer cup is empty. Time to work. Punchline ending. Breakfast is the best part of your day, which tells you everything you need to know about your day. Getting dressed doesn't improve your day, it just adds itching. Your wardrobe is one wool tunic that hasn't been washed since last winter, which now weighs as much as a small cow from accumulated grime. Shoes are barely stitched leather, or nothing at all, meaning you walk barefoot through mud, dung, and medieval mystery puddles like it's normal. You scratch constantly. Everyone does. Lice is not an infestation. It's a lifestyle. You stand up from your straw bed and immediately feel the cold bite through the fabric you slept in, which is also the fabric you wore yesterday and the day before. That and the day before that, because medieval Europe does not believe in outfit changes. Your clothes are less fashion and more portable suffering. They exist for two reasons: to block the wind and to remind you that comfort is a myth told to children by liars. First you pull on your tunic. Wool, of course. Thick, scratchy wool that feels like it was woven from angry sheep hair and spite. It traps warmth, sure, but it also traps everything else: sweat, dirt, smoke, fleas, and the faint aroma of your household livestock. It's basically a wearable sponge of medieval life. Every time you move, the fibres scrape your skin like 1,000 tiny accusations. Why are you alive? What did you do to deserve this? If you have an underlayer, it's linen, a thin, rough shirt that's meant to protect your skin from wool, but mostly just adds another layer of dampness. Linen is cooler, less itchy, but it also becomes stiff when it dries and clings when it's wet, meaning it's either uncomfortable or uncomfortable in a different way. You've never experienced soft fabric. The best you can hope for is fabric that only hurts a little. Now, the important part, your tunic has not been washed in a long time, because washing clothes is not a casual chore, it's an event. It means hauling garments to a stream, smashing them against rocks, scrubbing with lye soap that eats skin, and then waiting for them to dry in weather that might freeze them into a shirt-shaped slab. Most people simply choose to smell like history, and the funny thing is, everyone smells like history so nobody notices. The only people who smell clean are monks, and that's suspicious. But the grime has benefits in a deeply medieval way. Dirt and body oils clog the fabric, making it more wind-resistant. So yes, your filth is also insulation. You're essentially wearing a protective coating of human grease like a medieval rain jacket. Modern people buy moisture-wicking gear. You develop a crust. Then come your legs. You might wear hose, tight cloth leggings that bunch at the knees and offer the warmth of a damp napkin. If you're lucky, you have wraps, strips of cloth you wind around your calves. If you're unlucky, you just let the cold take your shins and hope you don't lose feeling by midwinter. Some peasants wear nothing but their tunic and bare legs, which is a bold choice that says, I'm either very tough or I've given up completely. Now, the shoes. Shoes are a luxury. Real shoes with thick soles and proper stitching are expensive. Most people have simple leather shoes that barely survive a season before splitting open like old fruit. They're held together with laces and prayers. The soles are thin, which means every pebble is felt intimately. Walking becomes a sensory experience, and the sensation is always pain. Many people, especially the poorest, go barefoot. That means you're stepping directly onto mud, manure, straw, ice, sharp rocks, and mystery. Puddles that could contain anything from rainwater to someone's breakfast. Your feet become tough, cracked, and permanently stained. They develop calluses like armour. If medieval Europe had a beauty standard, it would be feet that look like they've seen war. The itching begins almost immediately, because your clothes are alive, not metaphorically, literally. Lice, fleas, mites. All of them love wool. Straw bedding helps too, because straw is basically an insect nightclub where everyone's invited and nobody leaves. You scratch your scalp, your neck, your elbows, your waistline. Everyone scratches. It's so normal that you can recognize your neighbors by how they scratch. Some people scratch politely. Some scratch like they're digging for treasure. Some scratch with such dedication you assume it's their full-time job. And lice aren't just something you get rid of. You manage them. You live with them. Sometimes you comb them out with a fine-toothed comb and crush them between your nails like you're popping tiny medieval bubble wrap. Sometimes you pick them off each other in the evening, sitting around the fire like a family bonding activity. Romance in the medieval era isn't candlelight dinners, it's delousing your spouse and not judging them for the size of the bugs. And still, you dress every day. You pull on the same layers, you lace up the same shoes, you step into the same world. Because even though your clothes itch and your feet ache, they're still your shield against cold, wind, and the general cruelty of the era. You scratch your arm one more time, sigh, and adjust your tunic. Punchline ending. It's not that your clothes are uncomfortable, it's that they're trying to train you for a life where nothing feels good ever again. There is no toothbrush, no toothpaste. Some people chew twigs, but mostly your teeth are on their own. By your mid-20s, your mouth looks like a haunted crypt. Cavities are everywhere, toothaches are constant. And if an infection spreads, you can literally die from it. If you need a tooth pulled, you visit the barber surgeon, the same man who cuts hair and also removes teeth with an iron hook in candlelight. It's like going to get a trim and leaving without dignity. At first, you don't even notice it happening. You're young, you're busy, your days are full of mud, hunger, work, and trying not to step in anything suspicious. Your teeth? They're just there, doing their job, chewing your bread brick and your eternal stew. And then one morning you wake up with a dull throb in your jaw. You assume you slept wrong, or a spirit cursed you, or you angered a saint by blinking incorrectly. You ignore it, because ignoring pain is basically medieval Europe's national hobby. But the throb doesn't go away. It grows. It blooms behind one molar like a tiny hammer tapping from inside your skull. Every bite sends a sharp sting up into your temple. Drinking hot broth hurts. Drinking cold beer hurts. Breathing hurts if you do it wrong. And the worst part is, there is no real solution. You don't have a dentist. You don't even have the concept of a dentist. You have prayer, you have homemade remedies, and you have a local man who thinks medicine is mostly about cutting things off. Tooth pain is common here. Everyone has it. It's almost a rite of passage. You see people walking around with one hand pressed to their cheek, squinting through misery while still carrying firewood and digging fields, because Labour doesn't care that your mouth is trying to kill you. Someone in the village always has a swollen jaw. Someone is always complaining that they can't chew on one side. It's such a normal sight that nobody even asks anymore. They just nod sympathetically and offer you the medieval equivalent of advice from WebMD. Try chewing on cloves, they say. Try rubbing garlic on it. Try rinsing with wine. Try praying to Saint Apollonia, patron saint of toothaches, because yes, there are saints for teeth. That's how much teeth were a problem. Sometimes people chew twigs, usually from aromatic trees, to scrape plaque. It's a primitive toothbrush, though the main benefit is that it gives your mouth something else to focus on besides agony. Some people use cloth to wipe their teeth, but there's only so much you can do when your diet is mostly bread, porridge, and whatever gritty bits of stone got mixed into the flour at the mill. Every loaf comes with a free side of sand. You're basically brushing your teeth with every bite, just in the worst possible way. And because sugar isn't a daily indulgence for peasants, you'd think maybe cavities wouldn't be as bad. But no. Bad teeth aren't just about sugar. They're about grinding grain between stones that shed grit. They're about malnutrition weakening your body. They're about infection spreading unchecked. It's about never having real dental care, ever. Your teeth wear down, crack, rot, and eventually revolt like they've been waiting their whole lives for this moment. When the pain becomes unbearable, when you can't sleep, can't eat, can't think, you finally do what everyone eventually does. You go to the barber surgeon. The barber surgeon is a magical creature of medieval society, half hairdresser, half butcher, and fully confident. He cuts hair, he trims beards, he opens abscesses, he sets bones, he drains blood, and when you come in clutching your cheek like you're about to collapse, he smiles warmly, as if this is the easiest thing in the world. He leads you into his shop, where the smell is part soap, part blood, part something metallic you don't want to identify. His tools are displayed proudly, knives, razors, needles, forceps, hooks, all reused, all only sometimes cleaned. The atmosphere is cozy in the same way a dungeon is cozy. He tells you to sit, you sit. He doesn't offer anesthesia because anesthesia hasn't been invented yet. Pain relief is a cup of ale, a block of wood to bite, and the comforting knowledge that you're about to discover new levels of suffering you didn't know existed. He reaches for the tooth puller. It's an iron instrument that looks like it was designed for removing bolts from a castle gate. He wedges it into your mouth. You try not to cry because you are an adult and medieval adults do not cry. They simply suffer quietly and develop permanent trauma. And then he yanks. The pain explodes. The tooth comes out with a sound you'll remember forever. There is blood. There is panic. There is a moment where you see God, briefly, and he looks disappointed. But then relief. Not comfort. Not joy. But relief. The pain stops, replaced by a raw, aching emptiness. You stagger home, clutching your jaw, proud you survived, and you know what's coming next. Because in medieval Europe, your teeth don't just betray you once, they keep trying until they win. Punchline ending, in the medieval world, your teeth are like co-workers who hate you, quiet at first, then suddenly they ruin your whole life and you still have to show up for work tomorrow. Now you work, you plough, you dig, you harvest, you carry water, you do it 6 days a week, sunrise to sunset, with tools made of wood and stubbornness. If you're a woman, you do all of this, plus childcare, cooking, spinning wool, and pretending you're fine. Children start working around age 5. There is no concept of burnout. There is only die later. The sun isn't even properly up yet, but your day has already begun, because medieval Europe doesn't care about your need for rest. Rest is a rumour, like unicorns or clean underwear. You step outside with your tools, if you own tools, and feel the damp cold air slap you awake. Your joints ache before you even move, but there's no time to stretch. Stretching is for people who have leisure. You have chores. Work here is not something you do, it's something you are, and it starts with the land. If you're a peasant farmer, your entire life revolves around the field like it's a cruel, muddy god. You plough soil that has been worked to exhaustion for generations, using a heavy wooden plough that feels like it was designed specifically to destroy your shoulders. If you're lucky, you have an ox or a horse to pull it. If you're not lucky, you are the ox. You lean into it, feet sliding in mud, arms trembling, and you wonder quietly how long a human spine can remain straight before it just gives up and folds into modern punctuation. You dig, you plant, you weed, you haul manure, you do all of it by hand with tools that are more like suggestions than equipment. A hoe is a stick with a piece of iron on it. A shovel is a plank with a handle. The scythe is sharp, yes, but also eager to take your fingers if you blink wrong. Farming is like an endless workout. except there's no reward afterward besides the privilege of not starving, and there is always something to carry: water, firewood, grain, stones, bundles of straw, whole baskets of vegetables, sometimes your own sick child. You carry everything all the time because medieval life runs on muscles, and muscles run out fast. You carry until your arms shake and your back burns and your hands blister. Blisters, by the way, are just part of the uniform. The only people without calluses are babies and nobles, and even babies don't get to stay soft for long. Then there's the Lord. Your work is not just for your family. A big chunk of your labour belongs to someone else. You owe the local Lord service. Days spent working his land, fixing his roads, building his fences, harvesting his grain. It's like having a second job where your boss lives in a stone house and your paycheck is you may continue living on my land. If you complain, you get punished. If you resist, you get beaten. If you run away, you become a fugitive. In medieval Europe, the concept of quitting does not exist. You work until the bell tells you to stop. And even then, you don't stop. If you're a woman, your day is even longer. You work in the fields, yes, but you also manage the household. You cook, you fetch water, you clean, you preserve food, you spin wool into thread, thread into cloth, cloth into clothing. You patch garments, you tend the fire, you care for children, you care for the sick, you care for the elderly, you care for the animals. Your whole life is labour layered on labour, and if you ever look tired, society simply assumes that's your natural face. Children work too. There is no childhood the way we imagine it. The moment a child can walk without falling into a ditch, they can contribute. At 5 or 6, they're gathering sticks, chasing geese, carrying small loads, watching younger siblings. By 10, they're helping in the fields. By 12, they're basically adults with smaller bodies. You don't ask them how they're feeling. You ask them if they've finished the chores. And the wild part is, this is considered normal. No one sees it as cruel. It's just life. Everybody works because everybody has to. The only people who don't work are nobles, monks, and the village drunk, and even the drunk technically works at being drunk with impressive dedication. You work through sickness. You work through grief. You work with a toothache so severe it makes your vision blur. You work with hunger gnawing at your gut like an animal. You work because stopping is not an option. If you stop, the crops fail. If the crops fail, you starve. If you starve, you die. It's a simple system, really. And yet, somehow, you do it. Day after day, year after year. You build calluses. You build endurance. You build a body shaped by necessity. And by the end of the day, when you finally sit near the fire and feel your muscles throb, your hands cracked and sore, you realize the truth. Medieval Europe doesn't kill you quickly. It just works you to death politely. Punchline ending. Your spine may not be straight anymore, but don't worry. Neither is the economy, the weather, or your future. You want to drink water, but the stream is full of parasites, and someone upstream is dumping waste into it. Bathing is rare because people believe washing opens your pores to disease. So you drink weak beer because brewing boils water, and therefore gives it slightly better survival odds. It's medieval hydration, low alcohol, high desperation. You step outside with a bucket because every day in medieval Europe includes at least one journey to fetch water. Sometimes 2, sometimes 3. Sometimes you feel like your entire life is just carrying liquids from one place to another, while your body slowly turns into wet rope. In modern life, hydration is a cute little wellness goal. You get a fancy bottle with a motivational quote on it, and pretend you enjoy drinking lemon water. In medieval Europe, hydration is a high-stakes gamble you play daily, and the prize is not dying of diarrhea. The stream is nearby. It always is, because villages settle close to water sources the way humans always have, because you can't grow crops without it, and you can't live without it. But the stream is not the sparkling, romantic, babbling brook you see in movies. It's a working stream, It's used for everything: washing clothes, washing vegetables, watering animals, dumping waste, tossing scraps, and yes, occasionally drinking, which is insane if you think about it. You approach the water and it looks fine at first glance. It moves, it shines, it makes that pleasant little sound that makes your brain go, "Ah, nature." But then you notice the details, the cloudy patches, the strange foam, the dead leaves, the animal tracks along the bank, and the fact that you just watched a goat relieve itself directly into it without even feeling embarrassed. Upstream, someone is dumping a chamber pot. Downstream, someone is washing their bloody bandages. This is a community resource. It's also a community hazard. But you have no choice. You dip your bucket in, and you try not to think too hard about what else might be floating past. You tell yourself the moving water cleans itself. You tell yourself God made it, and God wouldn't poison you. You tell yourself a lot of things, because survival sometimes depends on denial, and then you drink it, and you regret it later. Because medieval water is filled with things you cannot see, but will absolutely meet eventually. Parasites, bacteria, worms that set up shop in your intestines like they pay rent, dysentery, typhoid, cholera-like illnesses. Nobody calls them those names yet because medicine hasn't progressed enough to label the horrors properly. Instead, people just say things like, "I have the flux," or "my stomach is angry," or "I've been to the latrine 14 times and I think I saw God in there." Diarrhea is so common that it's basically part of your life schedule. You accept it the way modern people accept seasonal allergies. Sometimes your body just empties itself violently for days. You lose weight, you lose strength, you lose dignity, and if you're already malnourished, that can kill you. Quietly, efficiently, like water itself is working for the enemy. So naturally people get nervous about drinking plain water. Not everyone understands why it's dangerous, but everyone understands that sometimes water makes you sick. Which leads to the medieval solution. Drink beer instead, or ale, or small beer, or anything that's been brewed, because brewing involves boiling water and boiling helps. The monks understand this more than anyone. Monasteries brew constantly, producing low-alcohol drinks for everyone, including children. It's not about getting drunk, though that's a pleasant bonus sometimes. It's about drinking something that won't betray you. Small beer is basically medieval Gatorade. Thin, mild, slightly sour, and often made with leftover grains. You drink it in the morning, you drink it while working, you drink it at dinner, your toddler drinks it. The baby probably has a sip too. It's so normal that nobody thinks twice about it. The entire continent is casually functioning on low-grade alcohol because the water supply is a cursed experiment. Bathing doesn't help either. You might assume people would bathe more to stay clean and healthy, but bathing is complicated. Water is cold, soap is harsh, privacy doesn't exist. And many people believe that bathing in winter opens your pores and lets sickness creep in. The logic is, cold water plus open pores equals death. And honestly, in an age where everyone is dying constantly, you can't fully blame them for being suspicious of anything that feels even slightly refreshing. So instead, you wash your hands sometimes. Maybe. You wipe your face with a cloth. You rinse the dirtiest parts when absolutely necessary. But mostly you just live with layers of grime. Dirt becomes a permanent accessory. You don't smell clean, you smell like smoke, sweat, wool, and survival. Everyone does. Nobody notices because the entire town smells like a barn that lost a war. And through all of this, you drink carefully. You drink beer. You drink watered wine when available. You drink from wells if you trust them. You avoid stagnant water unless you want to roll the dice with your organs. And every sip you take is a small act of courage, because in medieval Europe, water isn't just a drink, it's a threat. Punchline ending. The modern world says stay hydrated. Medieval Europe says good luck, and may your intestines forgive you. You feel sick. So a doctor arrives and announces your humours are out of balance. The cure is bloodletting, or leeches, or purging, or prayer. Surgery is done with tools that have not been properly cleaned since the Crusades, and there is no anaesthesia unless you count passing out from pain. If you recover, God did it. If you die, God also did it. Medicine here is a roulette wheel with a cross on it. It starts with something small, a cough, a fever, a strange ache in your bones that feels like someone replaced your marrow with cold porridge. You try to ignore it, because medieval life has taught you that pain is just background music. But the fever grows, your head throbs, your stomach churns, you sweat through your wool tunic and somehow still feel cold. And that's when your family makes the decision. It's time to call for help. In modern life, this means a doctor's appointment, a pharmacy run, maybe a little WebMD panic. In medieval Europe, it means summoning someone who owns a knife and feels spiritually confident about it. There are different kinds of healers in your world. If you're lucky, there's a local wise woman who knows herbs and common remedies. She might brew you a tea of willow bark for pain, or apply poultices made from garlic and honey. Some of it actually helps, not because medieval people were dumb, but because they learned through trial, error, and the occasional tragic death. But wise women are also dangerous to rely on, because if you get too much better too quickly, someone might accuse her of witchcraft, and nothing ruins a treatment plan faster than execution. If you're not lucky, you get a physician. A physician is usually educated, which in medieval terms means he has read books written by men who also didn't know what was happening. Most medical knowledge comes from ancient Greek and Roman texts, especially Galen and Hippocrates, filtered through centuries of translation, misunderstanding, and the Church's constant need to make everything spiritually themed. This doctor wears nicer clothing, speaks in Latin sometimes just to show off, and looks deeply pleased with himself as he prepares to misunderstand your illness. He asks your symptoms. He examines your urine like it's a fine wine. He looks at your tongue, your eyes, your skin, and the stars, if he has time. Then he nods gravely and declares the truth. Your humours are out of balance. The humours are the 4 bodily fluids that medieval medicine believes control your health and personality: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. If you have too much of one, you get sick. If you have too little, you get sick. If the moon is in the wrong place, you get sick. If you breathe too deeply near a swamp, you get sick. You're a walking collection of fluids and vibes, and the universe has decided your vibes are rancid. The solution? Remove something, usually blood. Bloodletting is the medieval equivalent of turning something off and on again. Got a fever? Bloodletting. Headache? Bloodletting. Sadness? Bloodletting. The doctor believes your blood is too abundant or too hot, so he must drain it, like he's fixing a clogged medieval sink. He produces a little blade, maybe a lancet, maybe just something sharp enough. And then, without hesitation, he slices a vein in your arm. You watch your blood flow out into a bowl. And everyone nods like this is reasonable. If bloodletting feels too harsh, there are leeches. Yes, actual leeches. Slimy little creatures placed on your skin to suck your blood more politely. The leech attaches, swells, and drops off. It's like hiring tiny wet vampires as your medical team. The doctor looks satisfied, as if he's just performed a sophisticated procedure. You look at your arm and wonder how you ended up in this timeline. If you're unlucky, the doctor decides you need purging. This can mean vomiting, or diarrhea, or both. He gives you a foul potion made of herbs, minerals, and regret. It forces your body to expel everything inside you, because the logic is, if sickness is inside you, then emptying you must cure it. It's like trying to fix a leaking roof by demolishing the house. But again, everyone nods. It's science. And through all of this, Prayer is always included. Someone calls the priest brings holy, water, blessings, and stern reminders that illness might be a punishment from God. He tells you to confess your sins. You try to remember if you've committed sins recently, but honestly, your entire life feels like a sin. You confess anyway, because the priest is loud and you're too weak to argue. If you survive, God is praised. If you die, God is praised too. Surgery exists, but it is horrifying. Broken bones are set, wounds are stitched, abscesses are drained. Sometimes amputations happen, fast, brutal, and without anesthesia. The only pain relief is alcohol, biting down on cloth, or fainting. The tools are reused constantly, rarely cleaned properly, and handled by men who have also been cutting hair moments earlier. You can walk in for a shave and walk out missing a toe, and everyone will act like that's normal. And the craziest part, sometimes it works. Not because the doctor knew what he was doing, but because your body is stubborn. Because honey has antibacterial properties. Because some herbs reduce inflammation. Because people's immune systems fight hard. But medicine here is a gamble. You don't recover because of science, you recover because you survive the doctor. Punchline ending. Medieval doctors don't cure you. They just make you so busy bleeding, purging, and praying you forget what you were sick with in the first place. Food is scarce, and also dangerous. Bread is sometimes bulked up with bark, sawdust, or clay. Rye can contain ergot fungus, which causes convulsions and hallucinations. So yes, sometimes you eat bread and then spend the night seeing angels while sweating through your tunic. Flavour comes from onions, salt if you're lucky, and suffering. Spices are so expensive they might as well be currency. By the time evening rolls around, your body feels like it's been used to plough the earth directly. Your hands are sore, your shoulders ache, and your legs have that heavy, dead feeling like they're filled with wet sand. You shuffle back to the hut following the smell of smoke and stew, and for a brief moment you feel something dangerously close to modern comfort. Dinner. Now, don't get excited. This is medieval dinner, which means it's less meal and more calorie delivery system. But still, after a day of labour, anything warm feels like a gift from heaven. You sit near the hearth, breathing in the scent of boiling grains and onions, and you prepare yourself for the same ritual you've done every night of your life. Eat what's available, thank God it exists and hope it doesn't kill you. The stew is already bubbling in the pot. Always the pot. The eternal pot. The pot that has witnessed generations of family arguments, births, deaths, and the slow evolution of misery. It's filled with pottage again, grains, legumes, roots, maybe cabbage, maybe leeks if the garden was kind. If your family's fortunate, there's a bit of salt pork floating in there like a tiny miracle, but most nights it's just watery mush that smells faintly of old vegetables and survival. You scoop it into a bowl and you blow on it carefully. Not because you're delicate, but because burning your mouth is the last thing you need when your teeth are already plotting to betray you. You take a bite, it's warm, it's bland, it tastes like existence. Then comes the bread. Bread is the centerpiece of medieval life. It's the backbone of your diet, your main source of energy, and occasionally your weapon. But good bread, soft, light bread, is for the rich. For you, bread is dense, dark, heavy. It's often rye, barley, or a mixture, depending on what grain survived the season. Sometimes it's so hard you have to dip it into stew just to chew it without snapping a molar clean off. You hold it in your hand and it feels like a medieval dumbbell, and you're grateful. Because there were years, recent years, when there was no bread at all. But bread is also suspicious. Flour is expensive and sometimes it's stretched with whatever can bulk it up. Bark, ground up peas, bran. Sometimes even clay, which sounds insane. But when people are hungry, they become wildly creative. You don't know what's in your bread. You just know it exists and you eat it with faith and a little fear. And then there's the problem of fungus. Sometimes rye is infected with ergot, a blackish fungus that grows on the grain when conditions are wet. Ergot can cause convulsions, vomiting, burning sensations in the limbs, and hallucinations so vivid you'll swear you saw the Virgin Mary giving you a disappointed look. In some cases, it can even lead to gangrene, where your fingers or toes turn black and fall off like they're shedding, which frankly is an extreme reaction to dinner. But you don't know this. You just know that occasionally after eating bread, someone starts acting strange. A neighbour begins twitching uncontrollably. Someone cries and screams that demons are in the walls. A child stares into the fire, whispering about angels. A man collapses and convulses, foaming at the mouth, while everyone prays loudly and blames sin. You sit there chewing slowly, thinking, is this bread haunted? Sometimes the symptoms are mild. You just feel dizzy, sweaty, flushed. Sometimes you get the burning sensation, where your skin feels like it's on fire. People call it St. Anthony's fire, and they believe it's either a punishment or a spiritual trial. They don't realise it's literally mould poisoning. Medieval Europe has no concept of food safety. There's no expiration date. There's just, does it smell okay? If yes, eat it. If no, eat it anyway, because hunger is louder than disgust. And despite all of this, dinner is still the best part of your day. Because it's warm, because it fills your belly, even if only for a while. Because for a few minutes, everyone sits together, and the world feels almost stable. The fire crackles. Someone tells a small story. The children quiet, down. The animals settle. You feel the weight of the day soften slightly. Of course, luxury is not part of this meal. Flavour is limited. Spices exist, but they're reserved for the wealthy. A pinch of pepper costs more than your shoes. Cinnamon is basically a treasure. The closest you get to seasoning is onions, garlic, maybe herbs from the garden. Salt is precious and sometimes rationed, so your food tastes simple, flat, honest, like it's not trying to impress anyone, and maybe that's fine. Because you don't need dinner to be exciting. You need dinner to keep you alive. You eat your bowl, you drink a little beer, you wipe your mouth, you feel full enough to not collapse immediately, and you look at the bread thinking, please don't give me visions tonight. Punchline ending. In medieval Europe, dinner is always a surprise. Sometimes it's comfort, sometimes it's poison, and sometimes it's a full spiritual experience you didn't ask for. The church controls everything. The calendar, the laws, your guilt, your fear, your understanding of the world. The Bible is in Latin, so you rely on priests to interpret it, which is great because priests are also humans and humans love power. You pay tithes even when you're starving. Missing prayer is dangerous. Doubting is deadly. And hell is described so vividly you can practically smell it, which fits the medieval vibe perfectly. In modern life, religion is often a personal choice, something you explore, question, maybe even ignore until the holidays when your mum texts you about going to church. In medieval Europe, religion is not a choice. It is the air, it's the calendar, it's the legal system, it's the explanation for why your crops failed, why your baby got sick, why your neighbour's cow is acting strangely, and why that one guy in the village keeps getting struck by lightning. Everything is spiritual. Everything is symbolic. Everything is your fault. Your entire week is shaped by the church. Bells. They ring to tell you when to wake, when to work, when to pray, when to stop. The sound becomes so familiar it's like background noise, like modern people hearing traffic outside their apartment. Even if you want to forget God for an afternoon, the bells won't let you. They clang through the air, vibrating in your bones, reminding you that heaven is watching and you are, statistically, doing something wrong. The calendar itself belongs to the church. You don't track time by dates the way modern people do. You track it by saints' days, feast days, and holy seasons. Lent, Easter, Advent, Christmas. These aren't just religious events. They dictate your diet, your behaviour, your celebrations, even your mood. On fasting days, you can't eat meat, dairy, or rich food, which is funny because you weren't eating rich food anyway. Medieval fasting is essentially continue being poor, but with more guilt. And if you're thinking, at least the church offers comfort, yes, sometimes it does. When life is brutal and uncertain, faith can be a warm blanket. People pray for protection, healing, a good harvest. They pray for their dead. They pray for their children. They pray because praying feels like doing something, and in medieval Europe doing something is better than admitting you're powerless against weather, disease, and the constant possibility of being stabbed over bread. But the church doesn't just soothe, it controls. The Bible is written in Latin, and you don't speak Latin. Nobody you know speaks Latin. If you tried, the best you could do is pronounce a few words poorly, and then get accused of arrogance. So you rely on priests to interpret scripture for you. And priests, like all humans, enjoy authority. They tell you what God wants. They tell you what sin is. They tell you what happens if you disobey. The priest is the voice of heaven in your village, and that voice is often stern, loud, and extremely committed to making you feel guilty for existing. You are told you are born sinful. You're told your thoughts are sinful. You're told your desires are sinful. You're told if you laugh too much, you might be inviting the devil into your soul. Fun is suspicious. Pleasure is suspicious. Confidence is suspicious. If medieval Europe had a motivational slogan, it would be, stay humble, stay afraid, pay your tithe, and yes, the tithe. Even when your family is starving, you still owe the church a portion of your grain, your livestock, your income, whatever you have. It's basically a spiritual tax, and you pay it because not paying it is dangerous. Not just because people will judge you, but because you genuinely believe God might punish you. The thought of skipping church or refusing the tithe fills you with dread. It's like cancelling your subscription to oxygen. Because the church doesn't just hold your community together, it holds your fear together. Hell is described in exquisite detail. Priests paint it like a destination you could stumble into accidentally, like stepping off a curb into traffic. Fire, screaming, demons, eternal torment. The suffering is so vivid you can almost smell it, which, honestly, is impressive, because medieval Europe already smells like a warm preview of hell on most days. Confession becomes your regular emotional maintenance. You kneel in the church, whispering sins to a priest behind a screen. You confess that you had a lustful thought, that you stole a turnip, that you resented your neighbour, that you didn't pray hard enough. The priest tells you to say prayers, do penance, and never forget that God sees everything, even your thoughts, especially your thoughts. And when disaster strikes, famine, plague, storms, religion becomes the explanation. God is angry. God is testing you. God is punishing the community. Someone must have sinned. Someone must be cursed. Someone must be a witch or a heretic or an outsider who offended heaven. Faith becomes less about comfort and more about survival, because if you don't behave correctly, the entire village might decide you're the reason God is mad. So you pray, you attend mass, you cross yourself before meals, you whisper blessings over sick children, you place your hope in saints and relics and holy water, because hope is one of the few things you can still afford. And even when you doubt, you keep it quiet. Because in medieval Europe, doubt isn't just a private feeling, it's a death wish. Punchline ending. You can ignore a bad harvest, you can ignore a toothache, you can even ignore the smell of your neighbour's pig, but you cannot ignore God, because God has excellent customer service, and he never lets you unsubscribe. If you're a woman, you're expected to work, obey, marry young, and produce children as if your body's a medieval factory. Childbirth is a death lottery. No sterile tools, no emergency care. just pain and prayer. And if you're outspoken or know herbs, congratulations, you might be accused of witchcraft and executed for having competence. Even in suffering, women are expected to suffer quietly and politely. You wake up before everyone else, because of course you do. The house is still dark, the fire is barely alive, and the air is cold enough to bite. You pull yourself out of the straw bed quietly so you don't wake the baby, the toddler, the pig, or your husband, who is snoring like a sawmill and will still wake up later claiming he's exhausted. Your day begins with a long list of tasks that will not end until you collapse again at night. In medieval Europe, being a woman means you don't just work. You work around work. You tend the fire, because if the fire dies, everything becomes harder. You fetch water because water is always needed and always heavy. You grind grain for pottage. You feed animals. You check on children. You clean whatever can be cleaned, which is not much, because your home is basically a barn with extra people. Then you head out to the fields, because women do farm labour too. You weed, harvest, plant, carry bundles, collect manure, and sweat through your clothes while your shoulders scream. Anyone who thinks medieval women sat around embroidering in silence has never tried to survive with a family of 7 and 1 pot of stew. And all the while you're pregnant, or recovering from being pregnant, or breastfeeding, or trying to become pregnant again because that's the expectation. A woman's worth is tied to childbirth, not because people are evil for fun, but because survival is brutal and labour is needed. More children mean more hands for work, assuming the children survive, which is a big assumption. Pregnancy isn't celebrated like it is today. It's not baby showers and gentle cravings. It's exhaustion and nausea and fear. Every pregnancy carries the quiet knowledge that you might not make it through. Childbirth is the most dangerous part. You go into labour at home on straw, surrounded by women, mothers, neighbours, midwives, because this is not a doctor situation. Doctors are expensive and mostly useless anyway. The midwives are experienced, practical, and probably the most skilled medical people in your entire village. They've delivered dozens of babies. They know what to do when things go smoothly. They also know what happens when they don't. And if childbirth goes wrong, there is no emergency care, no surgery, no sterile instruments, no safe cesarean, no blood transfusions, no antibiotics, just prayer, herbal remedies, and hope that your body doesn't give up. Infection is common. Hemorrhaging is common. Complications are common. Death is common enough that people talk about it in the same tone they talk about storms, tragic, expected, and out of anyone's control. You push, you scream, you sweat, you bite down on cloth. The pain is relentless, and everyone tells you this is normal because women have been doing this forever, which is not reassuring. You can almost feel the whole village holding its breath, not because they're worried about you exactly, but because everyone knows childbirth is a gamble. Will the baby live? Will you live? Will both of you live? If you make it through, you're praised for being strong. If you don't, you're mourned, briefly, and then replaced, because the household must continue. And even if you survive childbirth, the risks don't stop. You could die days later from infection. You could develop lasting injuries. You could become weak from repeated pregnancies. Many women spend their entire adult lives pregnant, nursing, recovering, then pregnant again. You age quickly. Your body is constantly being asked to give something it doesn't always have: blood, milk, strength, life. And if you don't fit the role, that's dangerous too. If you're outspoken, too independent, too knowledgeable, people notice. The medieval world does not love women who stand out. Women who know herbs, who heal, who assist births, who understand the body can be respected but also feared. If the village suffers, if crops fail, if disease spreads, if livestock die, someone will look for a reason. Someone will look for blame. And women, especially those who appear different, become easy targets. sometimes it's called witchcraft, sometimes it's called heresy, sometimes it's just called being inconvenient. So you learn to be careful, you keep your knowledge quiet, you offer help humbly, you lower your gaze, you don't speak too loudly, you don't argue with men, you don't question the priest. You do your work and carry your suffering with the kind of quiet endurance history rarely celebrates, but always depends on. Because medieval Europe doesn't run on kings and knights. It runs on women who keep the fire going, keep the children alive, keep the food cooking, keep the household functioning, even while their own bodies are being drained by the age. Punchline ending. In medieval Europe, being a woman means your job description is survive, give birth, work harder, and do it all while smiling politely like you're not one bad day away from screaming into a pot of stew. Medieval justice is brutal. Steal bread, lose a hand, accused of something, trial by ordeal, boiling water or drowning. If you survive, you're innocent. If you die, you're innocent. Either way, problem solved. Executions are public entertainment and people bring snacks. Violence isn't a breakdown of society. It's the glue holding it together. You grow up knowing one thing very clearly. Life is cheap here. Not in a poetic way, in a practical, daily, constant way. People die from hunger, disease, childbirth, winter, bad bread, and infected splinters. So when violence happens, it doesn't shock anyone. It just blends into the background like smoke from the hearth. Medieval Europe isn't full of constant sword fights like in movies. Most people are too tired for that, but the threat of violence hangs over everything like a storm cloud that never fully goes away. You learn early, don't steal, don't insult the wrong person, don't argue with the Lord's men, don't look suspicious, don't be different, and most importantly, don't get accused, because accusation is half the battle, and the other half is pain. The legal system here is not about fairness, it's about control. It's about making sure everyone knows what happens when you step out of line. Justice isn't designed to correct wrongdoing. It's designed to scare the rest of the village into obedience. The punishment is public, dramatic, and deliberately unforgettable. The goal is not to rehabilitate you. The goal is to make everyone watching think, I will never do that. Ever. Because I like having all my limbs. So if you steal bread, you might lose a hand. Not because the system cares about property, but because it cares about making an example. Hunger might drive you to take a loaf, but the law doesn't care about hunger. The law's the Lord's voice, and the Lord would rather you starve obediently than steal defiantly. Sometimes thieves are whipped, sometimes branded, sometimes hung, sometimes mutilated. The punishment depends on your luck, your social status, and whether the local officials woke up in a good mood, which they rarely do. And if you're accused of something bigger, witchcraft, murder, heresy, betrayal, you can be tested in ways that feel like a cruel joke. Enter. Trial by ordeal. This is medieval justice's finest moment of logic, a legal method so ridiculous it almost feels like satire. The idea is that God will protect the innocent, so if you're accused, you're subjected to a painful test, and your survival is taken as proof of innocence. Because nothing says fair trial like boiling water. One ordeal involves plunging your hand into boiling water or carrying a hot iron a certain distance. Then your wounds are bandaged, and after a few days they're inspected. If the burns heal well, you're innocent. If they heal poorly, you're guilty, which is impressive, because it's like asking someone to swim across a river with weights tied to them and then judging their moral character based on whether they drown quickly. Another ordeal is drowning. They tie you up and toss you into water. If you sink, you're innocent, but you might drown. If you float, you're guilty, and then you're executed for being guilty. So the system is perfect. You either die innocent or die guilty. Either way, the paperwork is simple. The whole thing operates on spectacle, because medieval justice is theatre, and like all theatre, it needs an audience. Executions are public events. The village gathers. People bring children. Vendors sometimes sell food. There's noise, gossip, excitement. It's not that everyone is bloodthirsty. It's that life is bleak and entertainment is rare. Executions are a communal ritual, a reminder of the rules, a warning wrapped in a grim little festival. You stand in the crowd, cold breath puffing in the air, watching someone on the gallows. Maybe it's a thief. Maybe it's a murderer. Maybe it's someone who simply angered the wrong person. You might not even know the full story. Most people don't. The point isn't understanding. The point is witnessing. The hangman is a recognizable figure, often hated but also necessary. He does his job and the crowd reacts, some cheering, some praying, some quietly turning away. Death is treated as both punishment and public lesson. It's the medieval version of a warning label, except instead of a hot coffee may burn you, it's steal a chicken and lose your entire life. And violence isn't limited to official punishments. There are bandits on the roads. There are feuds between villages. There are fights in taverns. There are raids during wars. There are drunken brawls, domestic disputes, and sudden stabbings that happen because someone looked at someone else's wife the wrong way. People carry knives, not because they're villains, but because knives are tools, and also because you might need one to defend yourself from a desperate, hungry man who has decided your bread looks like a solution. The law is harsh, but it doesn't always protect you. Sometimes it is the threat. So you live carefully. You keep your head down. You obey outwardly. You learn when to speak and when to stay silent. You learn which officials are cruel, which are merely tired, which can be bribed with food. You learn that justice here isn't blind. It's watching you. Always. Punchline ending. In medieval Europe, the law doesn't ask if you did it. It asks if God liked you enough to keep you alive during the test. Now the temperature drops and your home becomes a wooden refrigerator. No insulation, no glass windows. Firewood is expensive and sometimes illegal to gather. The fire smokes the whole hut because there's no chimney, but at least it keeps you from freezing. You sleep in layers of wool, clutching your blanket like it's a lifeline, while the wind whistles through the walls like a ghost doing stand-up comedy. Winter in medieval Europe isn't a season, it's a siege. It creeps in slowly at first. The mornings get sharper. The wind starts cutting across the fields like it has a grudge. The sunlight becomes weaker, more reluctant, like it's clocking in late and leaving early. By the time the first frost settles over the village, everyone is already tense because winter doesn't just bring cold, it brings risk. You feel it the moment you wake up. The hut is darker, the air heavier. Your breath comes out in little clouds, even inside. You pull your blanket tighter and immediately realize it's about as effective as covering yourself with a wet napkin. Wool helps, but wool is also scratchy, stiff, and honestly not on your side. You sit up and your body protests, aches in your joints, stiffness in your fingers, a deep soreness in your back. Winter makes everything hurt more, because cold doesn't just chill the air, it chills the bones. You look around the hut and see the same winter routine everyone repeats every year. The fire is everything now. Without fire, you die. It's that simple. So you go out to gather wood, even though the ground is frozen and every step feels like walking on knives. You collect fallen branches, dry twigs, whatever scraps you can find. But firewood is scarce. Forests have been cleared to make farmland. Trees are owned by lords, and gathering wood from the wrong place can get you fined, beaten, or worse. That's right, your heating system is legally complicated. Imagine freezing to death because your landlord says you're not allowed to pick up sticks. You don't just need wood for warmth, you need it for cooking, for boiling water, for drying clothes, for keeping illness at bay. And because winter days are long and dark, you need fire to make the hut feel less like a tomb. So you hoard wood like it's treasure. You count logs. You ration burns. You stare at the fire like it's your child whispering, "Please don't go out." When the fire burns, it fills the hut with smoke. There's no chimney. Sometimes there's a hole in the roof if someone was ambitious. Mostly the smoke just lingers. It curls around the ceiling and sinks into your clothes, your hair, your lungs. Everyone coughs in winter. Everyone's eyes water. The walls turn black with soot. You smell like smoke permanently, which is great because it masks the smell of everything else. But it also means your lungs are basically working overtime just to survive in your own home. Your windows are not windows, they're holes. Maybe there's a wooden shutter. Maybe there's oiled cloth stretched across an opening if your family is wealthy enough to have such luxury. But glass, real glass windows, that's for churches and nobles. You live with drafts, constant drafts. The wind slips through cracks in the walls like it's been invited. It whistles through the thatch roof. It slides under the door. It finds your feet at night, and it lingers there with cruel dedication. You try to block it. You shove rags into gaps. You stuff moss into cracks. You hang cloth over doorways. Sometimes you even plaster mud onto the walls again, layering more wet earth over old wet earth, hoping it hardens into something resembling insulation. But winter always wins eventually. You can patch, you can block, you can pray, and still the cold gets in. It's a patient enemy. And then there's food. Winter is when stores run low. The last harvest has to last until spring, which means you start rationing everything. Grain is measured carefully. Salted meat is precious. Vegetables are stored in cellars, but they rot or freeze depending on luck. Meals become smaller. Hunger returns in slow, creeping waves. You eat more pottage, thinner pottage, pottage that is mostly water and hope. Every bite is a calculation. Will this keep me alive until the thaw? Outside, the world becomes quiet. Fields are frozen. Roads are hard and slick. Travel is dangerous. Snow makes everything slower and heavier. People don't wander far unless they have to. Work continues, but it changes. Repairing tools, mending clothes, caring for animals, chopping wood, trying to keep the household from falling into ruin. Winter isn't a break. It's just different suffering. And at night, you sleep like you're bracing for impact. You pile on wool blankets, furs if you have them, straw beneath you, straw around you. Sometimes the whole family sleeps together for warmth, bodies pressed close, breathing in the same smoky air, listening to the wind rattle the walls. You clutch your blanket like it's a lifeline, because it is. You tuck your feet in tight, because frostbite is real, and toes are not guaranteed. You drift off, hearing the wind howl outside, and you realize winter in medieval. Europe doesn't feel like a cozy season. It feels like the world is trying to erase you. Punchline ending. Winter isn't just cold. It's the annual reminder that your house is made of sticks, your blanket is a lie, and nature has been waiting all year to humble you. On the coldest nights, everyone piles together for warmth. Parents, children, cousins, sometimes the neighbour. If you get the middle spot, you're warm. If you're on the edge, you're basically a sacrificial offering to frostbite. One wrong shift and you knock Aunt Maud into the freezing draft, and now you've become the family villain. Privacy doesn't exist. Survival does. Sleep in medieval Europe is not the gentle, peaceful ritual modern people imagine. It is not soft pillows and weighted blankets and those soothing little rain sounds, apps. No. Medieval sleep is tactical, strategic, survival-based. You don't sleep because you're cozy. You sleep because your body is shutting down like an exhausted animal, and because tomorrow you have to wake up and do everything again. First of all, the bed. Calling it a bed is optimistic. It's a raised wooden frame if you're lucky, or just a pile of straw on the floor if you're not. Sometimes there's a sack filled with hay or leaves. Sometimes it's just loose straw, like you're a horse. The straw is warmish, yes, but it's also full of insects. Fleas hop, lice lurk, bedbugs hold meetings. Your bedding is basically a medieval Airbnb for parasites, and you are the free breakfast. There's no separate bedroom. The whole family sleeps in one main room, often the same room where you cook, eat, store tools, and keep animals. Yes, the animals too. If it's cold enough, the goat is indoors. The pig might be indoors. The chickens are definitely indoors and furious about it. Your home is part house, part barn, and part biological experiment. But none of that matters when the cold truly sets in. When winter gets vicious, you don't sleep alone. Nobody does. You pile together for warmth because it's the only insulation you can afford. Human bodies are little furnaces, and you use them like it's your job. You gather everyone onto the same sleeping space. Parents, children, grandparents, cousins, sometimes even an aunt or a visiting neighbour if their hut is too cold. It's not unusual. It's just medieval central heating. The pile begins with a base layer, straw, then blankets, wool, rough and scratchy, then people, then more blankets, then more people. You become a stack of breathing bodies and itchy fabric, a desperate human casserole. The goal is simple: trap heat and hope nobody moves. Because if someone moves, everything collapses. There is a hierarchy to sleeping positions. The middle spot is prized. That's the warm zone, the sacred centre. If you get the middle, you're insulated by bodies on all sides, the air is warm, and you might even sweat, which feels illegal in winter. But the middle spot usually goes to the youngest child or the sickest person, or occasionally the loudest complainer. That's just medieval politics. If you're on the edge, you are in danger. The edge person is the one closest to the drafty wall, the cracked door, the wind that sneaks in through the thatch roof like a thief. Your job is to take the cold for the team. You're basically the human shield. The cold gnaws at your outer layer, and you spend the night curled tightly, trying to make yourself smaller, trying not to lose feeling in your fingers. You learn not to shift too much, because if you roll over and your elbow nudges someone, you might open a gap in the blanket, letting cold air rush in like an invading army. That cold air can wake everyone up instantly. It spreads through the pile like panic. Suddenly, the whole family is shivering, cursing and rearranging. And if you knocked Aunt Maud into the cold zone, you will hear about it for the next 6 months. Medieval grudges are long and fueled by boredom. The sounds of the night are intimate. You hear every breath, every cough, every snore. Someone wheezes. Someone mutters prayers. Someone grinds their teeth like they're chewing rocks even in their sleep. Children kick. Babies cry. Adults groan in their dreams. Occasionally, someone's stomach growls so loudly it sounds like a wolf outside. And somewhere nearby, an animal shifts in the straw, releasing a smell you will never forget. There is no privacy. None. If you have to get up in the night, you climb over bodies like you're escaping a shipwreck. If you need to use the chamber pot, you do it in the corner, probably with an audience of at least 2 half-awake relatives. If you have nightmares, everyone hears you. If you wake up sweating with a fever, everyone feels it. A medieval household shares everything: warmth, sickness, fear, and fleas. But despite the discomfort, there's something deeply human about it. Because this is how people survive. They huddle together, they share heat, they protect the weakest, they accept the indignities. In a world where winter kills, sleep becomes an act of cooperation. Your family is not just your social circle, they are your insulation. Your community is literally keeping you alive with body warmth. You close your eyes, wedged between siblings and scratchy blankets, listening to the wind outside and the soft breathing inside. You feel the warmth slowly build, and for a moment, you almost forget you're in a hut made of mud. You almost believe you're safe, and then someone farts. Punchline ending. Medieval sleep is cozy, in the way a crowded lifeboat is cozy, warm, terrifying, and full of noises you can't unhear. Animals come indoors because they generate heat. Cows, goats, pigs, chickens, everyone shares the same air. The house smells like a barn because it is a barn. But the livestock keeps you alive, and that's the only metric that matters. So you fall asleep to the sound of snoring relatives and snorting pigs, praying nobody steps in something warm in the morning. At some point in your medieval life, you stop thinking of animals as outside creatures. The modern concept of pets, tiny furry companions who sleep on plush beds and have their own Instagram accounts, does not exist here. Animals aren't friends, they're assets, they're food, they're labour, they're heat, they're literally your emergency savings account, your lawnmower, and your central heating system, all wrapped up in a slightly confused, slightly smelly body. So when winter hits hard and the cold turns brutal, you don't just shut the door and hope for the best. You bring the animals in. It starts small. A chicken comes inside because it's too cold for the coop. Then another. Then suddenly you're sleeping 3 feet away from a flock of angry birds who keep pecking at the straw like they're looking for loose change. Then the goat comes in, because goats are stubborn and will either freeze or destroy the fence trying not to freeze. Then the pig, because pigs are basically walking furnaces and also will absolutely die if left in the cold too long. And if you have a cow, oh, congratulations, you just acquired the medieval equivalent of a space heater. Cows generate warmth constantly. Their body heat fills the room like a slow, steady fire. If you stand near the cow, you can feel the temperature shift. It's like hugging a living radiator that also occasionally chews loudly and stares into your soul. This is why people keep livestock close, not because it's charming, but because heat is life. Heat means survival. Heat means your baby doesn't freeze. Heat means your fingers still function enough to hold a spoon. And yes, your house becomes a barn, but at least it becomes a warm barn. You rearrange your living space to make room. Animals are placed in a corner, sometimes behind a small fence or divider made of wood and hope. Straw is laid down, the animals settle, snorting and shifting, filling the room with the sound of heavy breathing. In a weird way, it's comforting. That sound means they're alive, and if they're alive, you're alive. Of course, along with warmth comes everything else animals bring. The smell is intense, it's rich, it's layered. It's not just manure, it's hay, sweat, wet wool, damp breath, and the faint odour of something fermenting in a way that feels spiritually wrong. The air becomes thick, and smoke from the fire mixes with animal scent until your hut develops its own permanent atmosphere. A warm, foggy soup of survival. You stop noticing it after a while because your brain adapts. Humans can get used to almost anything, including sleeping beside a cow that farts like a medieval cannon. But if a modern person stepped into your home, they would immediately faint. They'd drop like a noble at a peasant feast. Noise becomes part of life too. Chickens rustle and cluck in their sleep. Goats sneeze. Pigs snort and grunt, like they're arguing with invisible spirits. The cow shifts its massive body and shakes the whole hut. Meanwhile, your relatives are snoring, coughing, muttering prayers, and occasionally scratching themselves aggressively. It's a symphony of living creatures, all packed into one space, all trying to survive another freezing night. And the funny thing is, you feel safer with them there. Because animals aren't just warmth, they're security, they're stability. If you lose your cow, you lose milk, you lose labour, you lose food, you lose trade. Losing livestock is like losing your job, your savings, and your entire retirement plan in one day. That's why you treat them with care. You feed them first sometimes, you protect them, you bring them inside. You're not keeping a cow in your house because you're weird. You're keeping a cow in your house because you're smart. Still, it's not glamorous. Sometimes the animals relieve themselves indoors. There's no polite way to say it. Yes, the cow poops in the hut. The pig poops. The goat poops. Even the chickens contribute small offerings to the floor. You clean what you can, but the dirt floor absorbs everything like a sponge. In the morning, you wake up and navigate the hut carefully, stepping around suspicious piles in the dim light. Every footstep is a gamble, but you do it anyway. Because in medieval Europe, comfort is optional, warmth is not. So you lie down at night, surrounded by family and livestock, breathing in warm, barn-like air, listening to snorts and snores and wind outside. The cow's body heat radiates quietly into the room like a blessing, and for a moment, despite the smell, the noise, the filth, you feel grateful. Punchline ending. Sure, your home smells like a barn and your roommate is a cow, but at least the cow isn't trying to tax you, stab you, or diagnose you with too much black bile. By winter, you're dirty, and that's good, because layers of grime and body oils actually trap warmth and block wind. Washing is rare, and some believe bathing makes you sick by opening your pores to disease. So you develop a protective crust of filth that functions like medieval Gore-Tex. You smell terrible, but you're alive. That's medieval self-care. At some point in medieval life, you stop thinking of dirt as a problem and start thinking of it as a tool. Dirt is everywhere, in the fields, in the house, in your food, in your clothes, in your fingernails, and probably in places you don't want to talk about. It's part of the atmosphere. It's part of your identity. If modern people wear deodorant and moisturizer, you wear smoke, sweat, and a protective layer of barn essence. Because here's the thing, washing is not easy. In modern life, cleanliness is casual. You turn a knob, warm water pours out like a miracle, soap is cheap, and you can shower in 5 minutes without risking frostbite. In medieval Europe, bathing requires effort, fuel, privacy, and a level of optimism most peasants can't afford. Water has to be carried in buckets, heated over a fire and poured into a tub if you even have a tub. Most people don't. Most people have a bucket and a vague sense of shame, and winter makes it worse. In winter, water is cold enough to make you question your will to live. Heating it takes precious firewood, which is basically medieval gold, and stripping down in a hut with drafts means you're willingly inviting the cold to attack your naked body like a predator. You have to ask yourself, do I want to be clean, or do I want to be alive? The answer is always alive. So instead of full bathing, you do what you can. You wipe your face, you rinse your hands, you might wash your feet if they're truly in revolt. You might scrub behind your ears with a damp cloth if your spouse looks at you with concern. But mostly, you simply accumulate. Dirt builds, sweat dries, smoke clings, wool traps it all. You become a walking archive of your year, and somehow this is not seen as disgusting. It's seen as practical. Because dirt and body oils actually help. Yes, really. Your skin's natural oils plus grime plus layers of smoke residue create a barrier against wind. It makes your clothing slightly more water resistant. It blocks the chill from seeping in as easily. It's not comfortable, but it's effective. In a world where every draft is a threat, your filth becomes armor. It's like medieval skincare, except instead of exfoliating, you're building a crust. Sometimes you hear people say bathing makes you sick. This belief isn't completely random. People have noticed that those who bathe in cold water sometimes end up ill. They don't understand germs, but they do understand exposure. Cold water can lower body temperature. Wet clothes can chill you. Winter winds can destroy you. So the logic becomes, bathing opens the pores and sickness enters through them. It's not scientific, but it's based on a real observation. People often get sick after being cold and wet, so you avoid bathing, and you don't just avoid it, you become suspicious of it. Bathhouses exist in some cities, yes. There are public bathhouses where people soak and scrub and gossip, and in warmer seasons they're popular. But even those are risky. Communal water can spread disease, Towels are shared. Scrubbing isn't sterilizing, and if you're poor, you might not go at all. You might simply watch wealthy people bathe and think, must be nice to spend an entire afternoon cleaning yourself instead of cleaning pig droppings off the floor. There are still ways you try to stay clean, in medieval terms. You change your linen underlayer when you can, because linen is washable and sits next to your skin. It's your main defense against wool, itch and lice. You might hang your clothes near the fire to kill some bugs. You might shake out your straw bedding and pretend that counts as pest control. You might comb your hair and pick lice out like you're harvesting tiny evil grapes. Sometimes your spouse or family member helps, sitting close, parting your hair, crushing lice between their nails in a horrifying little bonding ritual. Romance, medieval style. And the smells? Everyone smells. You smell. Your neighbours smell. The Lord smells. The priest smells, though he pretends he doesn't. The animals smell. The streets smell. The entire village is one big odour ecosystem. So nobody's offended because there's no point. It's like living near the ocean. You stop noticing the salt. The only time you notice smells is when someone smells worse than normal. Then people whisper. Then people avoid them. Then people wonder if they're sick, cursed or possessed. Because in medieval Europe, bad smells aren't just gross. They're suspicious. They're associated with disease, decay, and sin. Miasma theory says bad air causes illness. So if you smell too foul, people might think you're literally contagious, which ironically isn't always wrong. But in winter, you embrace your grime. You wrap your wool tighter. You keep your crust intact. You let smoke and sweat and dirt settle into your clothes like a protective varnish, and you tell yourself it's fine. Because the truth is, you're not living for comfort. You're living for survival. And if survival requires smelling like a damp barn and feeling itchy all day, then congratulations, you're thriving. Punchline ending. Modern self-care is a bubble bath and scented candles. Medieval self-care is not bathing for 3 months and calling it weatherproofing. After decades of famine, crowding and weakness, rumours begin spreading from the ports. A disease from the east. People die fast. Painfully. Entire homes go quiet. You start seeing bodies in the streets, and the church bells ring so often they become background noise. No one understands what's happening. They just know one thing. Whatever this is, it's hunting. At first, it's just whispers. The kind of distant rumour that travels along trade routes the way gossip travels through a village. Quietly, dramatically, and with enough exaggeration to make you roll your eyes. You hear about strange deaths in faraway lands, ships arriving with crews that are missing, men collapsing in the street with black swellings under their arms, entire families dying in a week. People speak in low voices, glancing toward the sea like the ocean itself is sick, and you think, that's horrible, but it's far away. Medieval Europe has a talent for thinking disasters belong to someone else until they show up at your door. The first real sign comes from the ports. Traders, sailors, merchants. They start talking about a sickness moving west. Some say it began in the east beyond the known world. Some say it came from the steppes, carried by armies. Some say it rode in on ships full of exotic goods, spices, silk, and death tucked neatly in the cargo. No one agrees on the origin, but everyone agrees on the outcome. People are dying quickly. And not in the slow, starving way of famine, not in the lingering, coughing way of illness. This is fast. You hear stories of people going to bed feeling fine and waking up with a fever so fierce it melts their thoughts. Within hours, their skin turns hot, their breathing becomes frantic, and then the swellings appear, large, painful lumps in the groin, the armpits, the neck, buboes. They look like rotten fruit rising under the skin. They pulse. They blacken. They hurt so badly the person can't even be touched. Sometimes the swelling bursts, oozing blood and pus. Sometimes the person starts vomiting. Sometimes they bleed from the nose or mouth. Sometimes they go delirious, babbling about angels, devils, or the smell of bread. Then they die, usually within days, sometimes within hours. You can't comprehend it. Your village has seen death. Yes. But this is death at a pace that feels wrong. It's like someone has turned the dial up on mortality. Like the rules changed overnight without warning, and nobody received the update. The city reacts in the most medieval way possible, with confusion and denial. At first, people keep living normally. Markets stay open, taverns stay full, church services continue. Everyone prays harder, because when medieval people don't understand something, they increase prayer like it's a volume knob. They carry relics through the streets. They sing hymns. They beg saints for mercy. Some people whip themselves in public, thinking pain might impress God into stopping the disease. These flagellants march from town to town, bleeding on purpose, because apparently medieval Europe believes the best response to sickness is more sickness. Doctors try to explain it. They fail spectacularly. They blame bad air, miasma, a poisonous fog. They blame planetary alignment. They blame comets. They blame eclipses. They blame God's anger. They prescribe bloodletting because, of course, they do. They recommend herbs, potions, and carrying flowers to cover the smell. They tell people to stay away from corrupt air, which is difficult when the corrupt air is literally everywhere and also inside your neighbour's lungs. People start running. Some flee to the countryside, believing fresh air will save them. Some lock themselves inside their homes, refusing to open the door for anyone. Some rich families retreat to country villas with supplies and servants, leaving the poor behind like abandoned furniture. But it doesn't matter. The sickness follows. It moves through streets, through households, through bed sheets, through breath. You can't outrun it, because you don't even understand how it's travelling, and soon the city changes. The first thing that disappears is noise. The lively market becomes quieter, the shouting slows, the laughter vanishes, shops close, people stop gathering, the streets empty except for the sick and the desperate. You see men carrying bodies on carts because there aren't enough gravediggers. You see priests walking quickly, blessing the dying from a distance. You see neighbours avoiding each other, eyes wide, terrified of a cough. Then the bells start ringing. At first it's a few times a day, then every hour, then constantly. The sound becomes part of the air like rain. The bells toll for the dead, but they also toll for the living, warning everyone that the list is growing. Eventually you stop hearing them as separate sounds. They become background noise, a steady reminder that the world is unravelling, and the bodies become normal. You pass a house and see a mark on the door signalling sickness inside. You hear someone crying behind a shutter. You smell decay in the alley. You walk past a cart stacked with corpses covered in cloth, and you don't even stop, because stopping would mean acknowledging that this could be you tomorrow. The Black Death isn't just killing people, it's erasing the idea normal life. It's stripping away routine, safety, certainty, and replacing it with one constant thought: am I next? And now you understand the truth. This isn't a sickness that passes through like a storm. This is a predator, and you're living right in its hunting ground. Punchline ending. Medieval Europe has faced famine, war, and winter, but the plague shows up and says, "That's cute. Now watch this." As the candle burns low and the winds of medieval Europe quiet down, let's take a breath and look back at the spectacular mess you've survived tonight. You made it through mud, mould, and mystery meat. You dodged plague, outlasted famine, and learned to appreciate the defensive powers of dirt and a disgruntled house cow. You watched cities empty, winters attack, and doctors prescribe bloodletting with a straight face. And somehow, despite it all, people like you kept waking up. They kept going. Let's be honest, No one signs up for this much historical misery on purpose, but there's something quietly heroic about refusing to give up, night after freezing night, even when the world seems determined to slap the bread out of your hands. Maybe it's stubbornness, maybe it's hope, maybe it's just the promise of slightly warmer weather next spring. Either way, you are the descendant of the world's most resilient, resourceful, slightly grubby survivors. So tonight, as you tuck yourself into a clean bed, one with hot water, indoor plumbing, and zero livestock snoring beside you, maybe send a tiny, grateful thought back through time. Thank your ancestors for making it through centuries of lice, leeches, and soup that occasionally tried to kill them. Remember that every modern comfort you enjoy was bought, bit by stubborn bit, by people who stared down disaster and chose to keep living anyway. History, as we've seen, is gross, terrifying, and deeply funny. But it's also proof that people are hopeful, ridiculous, and surprisingly hard to wipe out. The world is still here, and so are you. So close your eyes, let the cold and chaos fade away, and drift off knowing that you are, against all odds, one of history's great survivors. Good night.